You know, there's this idea we all kind of have when we talk about government, that a more capable, more efficient government is always a better one. I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it? But what if that high capacity, that incredible power to get things done, could be turned towards goals that are, well, not so great? Okay, let's get into this, because today we're exploring the dark side of government power, all based on a fascinating paper that really digs into this very question.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we're going to unpack that common belief about government capacity. Then, we'll get into its potential dark side. After that, we'll introduce a whole new way to look at this, using the concept of public value. We'll see how it all works with an illustrative case study, and then we'll wrap it all up with what this means for how we should think about governance in general.
Okay, so first up, let's tackle this foundational idea that more is always better, what the source material calls the myth of more.
At the very heart of this whole discussion is this term, policy capacity. Now, in plain English, it's just a government's raw ability to get stuff done. It's everything. The skills of its people, the quality of its data, its money, its political clout. You can think of it as the engine of government.
For decades, pretty much everyone, academics, policymakers, you name it, they've all been working under this one core assumption. The more policy capacity a government has, the better off we all are. The thinking goes that more capacity naturally leads to smarter choices and better results for everybody. For a long, long time, this was just the accepted wisdom.
But, and this is a huge but, this is where our story takes a really sharp turn. It's time to look at the dark side of that very comfortable assumption. The paper we're looking at today poses this incredibly simple but really profound question that just changes everything. Capacity for what? And suddenly, we have to stop thinking about capacity as a goal in itself, and we have to start asking about its purpose.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. You have to think of capacity as just a tool, like a hammer. It's completely neutral. A hammer can be used to build a house. That's what we call value creation. Think of things like effective health systems or protecting the environment. But that exact same hammer can also be used to tear a house down, and that's value destruction. A super capable government can just as efficiently run a surveillance state or dismantle the very public services that people depend on.
So, okay, if capacity is just a tool, how in the world do we judge whether it's being used well or not? Well, this brings us to a new lens for our analysis: public value.
Now, to get a little bit more technical for a moment, the source paper uses existing research, like this framework you see here from Wu and his colleagues. Basically, it breaks down capacity into three types: analytical, managerial, and political. And it shows how these exist at three different levels: for individuals, for whole organizations, and for the entire system. This gives us a really detailed map of what capacity is made of, but it still doesn't tell us what it's for.
And that's where public value comes in. Public value is basically how we measure what we, the citizens, actually want and expect from our government. We're talking about things like quality services, trust, and outcomes that make our lives better, all delivered in a way that's fair and democratic. It gives us a target to aim all that capacity at.
This image here illustrates the whole idea brilliantly. It's called Mark Moore's strategic triangle, and it shows that to really create public value, a few things have to be in balance. First, it has to be operationally possible. That's the capacity part. Second, it needs to have legitimacy and support from the public. And third, and this is crucial, it has to be aimed at actually producing something of real value to citizens. All three have to work together.
Okay, enough with the theory, right? Let's see how this stuff plays out in a real-world, though I should say illustrative, example. The source paper gives us the perfect case study, the Department of Government Efficiency, or as it's called, DOGE.
So the paper asks us to imagine it's 2025 and a new federal agency called DOGE gets created. Its stated mission is to cut waste and fraud. I mean, on the surface, who could possibly argue with that? It sounds like a perfect example of building capacity for good governance, right?
And wow, was this department capable. It moved fast, and it had four main initiatives: aggressively rolling back regulations, slashing the federal workforce, getting rid of entire agencies and programs, and cutting expert advisory committees. It absolutely had the capacity to act.
And its actions had huge consequences. Just look at this number, 50,000. That's how many federal employees were reclassified, a move that basically stripped them of their job protections and made them much easier to fire. This is a very real number that shows the massive scale and impact of what DOG could do.
But, and here's the kicker, when you analyze what DOGE actually did through that public value lens we talked about, a completely different picture emerges.
This table from the paper shows a crystal clear pattern of value destruction. Deregulation? That led to weaker protections for the public. Workforce cuts? They degraded the quality of services. Getting rid of agencies and expert committees? Well, that led to policies made without evidence, and it just eroded public trust. So the really crucial point here is that high capacity was used to actively dismantle public value.
So what does all this mean for the bigger picture, for how we think about governance? Let's pull it all together.
This quote from the paper really is the heart of the entire argument. Building up a government's capacity isn't just some neutral technical exercise in making things run a little better. It is fundamentally about our values, about politics, and about the kind of society we actually want to live in.
So the paper's big suggestion is to integrate these two ideas. The policy capacity framework is awesome at telling us what capabilities a government has, but it can't answer that "for what" question. On the other hand, public value management gives us the goals and the ethics, but it can be a bit thin on the nitty-gritty of capacity. By combining them, we get a much richer and, frankly, more responsible way to think about how government should actually work.
So look, if you remember one single thing from all of this, let it be this: a powerful, efficient government is just a powerful tool. Whether that tool is used to build a better society or to tear one down depends completely on the values and the intentions of the people who are wielding it.
Which leaves us with a final and absolutely critical question. We know capacity is a tool. We know it can be used for creation or for destruction. The challenge for all of us as citizens is to really think about how we can design our systems of governance to make sure that this incredibly powerful tool is always used to build and never to break.